The recipe of God's bread in the book of Ezekiel. In the dusty stillness of Babylonian exile, the prophet Ezekiel stood silent, his heart heavy with the weight of God's message. The people of Israel had turned their backs on the Lord, and judgment was coming. Yet amid the warning, God offered a symbol, not through thunder or flame, but through bread. "Take wheat, barley, beans, lentils, millet, and spelt," God said. "Put them in one vessel and make bread." It sounded like a strange command, but Ezekiel knew God was never random. Every ingredient had a purpose. Every detail was prophecy in action. The 6 ingredients were gathered from whatever scraps remained in the land, symbols of survival in scarcity. Together they formed a bread that was not just for nourishment, but a living message to a nation about to face siege and famine. Ezekiel measured each grain with care, mixing the dry kernels with water to form a coarse dough. The vessel he used was cracked, weathered by exile, much like the people he was called to warn. Still he obeyed, for obedience to God always outweighed logic. Then came the hard part. God instructed him to bake the bread using human dung as fuel, a sign of the impurity the people would suffer. Ezekiel cried out, "Lord, I have never defiled myself." He was not trying to resist, but plead for mercy. God heard his heart. "Very well," he said, "use cow dung instead." It was a small relief, but the message remained clear. This was no ordinary meal. This was bread baked in shame, eaten in fear, representing hunger, exile, and unclean living. Each morning Ezekiel broke a small piece from the loaf and ate it with trembling hands. Not out of fear of the bread itself, but of what it meant. The coming days would be hard. Rations would be strict. Desperation would knock at every door. The people watched him, confused, perhaps even amused, but soon they began to understand. His actions were not madness, they were prophecy. This bread was their future, their warning, their wake-up call. The Lord had not given the recipe for health or pleasure. He had given it to awaken a sleeping nation. Through this humble loaf, God was speaking. "You did not listen when I sent words, so now I send symbols." And yet, in this bread of sorrow was also a trace of hope, for though the grains were mixed in poverty, they were still God's provision. Even in judgment, He gave sustenance. Even in exile, He made a way to survive. Years later, when the siege came and food ran out, perhaps someone remembered the bread Ezekiel made. Perhaps in their hunger they realized God had warned them, not to punish, but to save. And in that realization came repentance.